Thank you for your time and your attention to this critical part of our shared history. I am your host, and today we begin a deep exploration into a conflict that shaped a generation. In this premiere episode, we look at the origins of the Nigerian Civil War through the eyes of Frederick Forsyth. Forsyth was a young journalist on the ground during the war, capturing the raw reality of the conflict. His book, The Biafra Story, written in 1969, remains a seminal and powerful record of that era. It is a partisan account, written from within the blockaded Biafran enclave with deep sympathy for their cause. While we rely on his narrative, we also acknowledge modern historical perspectives that provide wider context. Later history confirms the violence he witnessed, but places it in a broader context of mutual failures. By blending his observations with broader history, we can better understand how a nation descended into war. Forsyth argues that Nigeria was never a naturally occurring nation, but an artificial colonial creation. In 1914, the British amalgamated the northern and southern protectorates, two vast and different regions. These regions had entirely different cultures, languages, and political systems forced into one unit. To Forsyth, this was a forced marriage. The north was conservative and Islamic, the south was not. The conservative, hierarchical north and the more republican, socially mobile east were essentially two different nations. When independence came in 1960, the celebration masked a fragile and thin reality of national unity. The post-independence government struggled to manage the deep-seated tensions between these regions. There was no deep-seated sense of Nigerianness, only a collection of ethnicities vying for power. The three-region structure created a permanent state of tension between the major ethnic groups. Early independence was marked by disputes and a growing fear of domination among the regions. By 1965, corruption was rampant and law and order were breaking down in the western region. The civilian government appeared unable to govern, and the military prepared to make its move. On the night of January 15, 1966, a group of young army majors struck a bloody blow. They executed several top political and military leaders, primarily from the north and west. Forsyth notes that while they claimed a nationalistic purpose, the lopsided killings raised suspicions. Because most coup leaders were Igbo, many northerners viewed it as a targeted Igbo coup. Major General Agi Ironsi, an Igbo, took power to restore order in the resulting chaos. However, his unification decree, which abolished the regions, only served to deepen northern fears. The northern backlash was swift and devastating. On July 29, 1966, a counter-coup began. It was a bloody purge targeting Igbo officers. General Ironsi was kidnapped and murdered. Colonel Yakubu Gowon emerged as the head of state, but trust had been mortally wounded. Then came the darkest hour. Forsyth describes a systematic campaign of ethnic cleansing. In late 1966, organized violence erupted against Igbos living across northern Nigeria. On the night of January 15, 1966, a group of young army majors struck a bloody blow. Thousands were slaughtered. Forsyth paints a picture of a people abandoned by their state. The scale was staggering, and the government's failure to protect them was absolute. Then came the exodus. Over 1 million Igbos fled back to their ancestral eastern homeland. They carried stories of horror, physical evidence of a federation that had failed its citizens. For Forsyth, this was the point of no return. The social fabric was torn beyond repair. Trust had evaporated. Secession was seen not as aggression, but as a move for survival. They felt they were no longer Nigerians, because Nigeria no longer protected them. They demanded justice, but what they saw was an Igbo general taking the reins of power. The logic of independence was being paved by the blood and trauma of 1966. It was only as the humanitarian disaster deepened that the world finally began to pay attention. Forsyth's writing reflects the urgency and righteous anger of the Biafran cause in 1969. We must consider that history is complex and many factors led to this total collapse. We have seen how colonial roots, coups and pogroms broke the idea of one Nigeria. Next, we follow the final diplomacy at Aburi and the formal birth of the Republic of Biafra. We have reached the end of our first chapter. The foundation has been laid for the conflict. Forsyth explains that the colonial logic of 1914 was strictly administrative, never social. The British sought to use southern revenue to subsidize the administration of the north. Economic links were built, but the people were kept in separate cultural silos for decades. The compromise reached at independence was inherently unstable from its first day. the parliamentary system struggled to reconcile the deeply divided interests of the regions. By the mid-60s, many felt that the democratic experiment was failing the Nigerian people. The January coup was not just about politics, it was about a total loss of faith in leadership. The young majors believed only a radical, military-led transformation could save the country, but their actions destroyed the military's internal hierarchy and its role as a neutral force. Nziogu's revolutionary rhetoric was drowned out by the screams of the families of the fallen. The counter-coup in July was a moment of absolute fracture within the Nigerian army. They demanded justice, but what they saw was an Igbo general taking the reins of power. Nziogu's revolutionary rhetoric was drowned out by the screams of the families of the fallen. Soldiers who had been brothers in arms suddenly became hunters and hunted. Trust vanished. The murder of Colonel Fajuyi, a Yoruba, alongside General Ironsi only added to the tragedy. Forsyth records that the violence against civilians was often premeditated and systematic. Radio broadcasts were used to identify and target Igbos living in northern communities. People who had lived in peace for years found their shops looted and their homes burned. The trauma of those months is a story of suffering that Forsyth insists must never be forgotten. The migration back to the east was not just a flight, it was a total abandonment of Nigeria. By the end of 1966, the east was filled with people who had no reason to believe in the Union. Secession was born from this trauma. It was a cry for a space where they could be safe. Eastern leaders sought a new arrangement, but the federal government held a different view. Forsyth documents these moments as the final nails in the coffin of the old Nigerian Federation. We must consider that history is complex and many factors led to this total collapse. While Forsyth's account is one side, the tragedy was shared by all who lived through it. In this series, we will continue to look at the war through these first-hand records. Next time, we look at the official birth of Biafra and the first shots of the Civil War. Thank you for joining us for this first look at Forsyth's account of this forgotten war. I look forward to seeing you again for episode 2. Stay safe and stay informed. Forsyth's research included interviewing hundreds of survivors in the refugee camps. Their testimonies provided a granular level of detail that many official reports lacked. He tracked the movement of people from the far north down to the Bight of Biafra. He argues that the early months of the crisis were largely ignored by the Western press. There was no deep-seated sense of Nigerianness, only a collection of ethnicities vying for power. The trauma of 1966 remained the heartbeat of the Biafran movement throughout the coming war. We have reached the end of our first chapter. The foundation has been laid for the conflict. In early 1967, a desperate attempt at peace was made in Aburi, Ghana. Leaders met to find a middle ground. Thank you for your time and your attention to this critical part of our shared history. The resulting accord promised a loose confederation, giving the regions more autonomy and security. But upon returning to Lagos, the federal government's interpretation differed from the East's. Trust broke again. For the East, the failure to implement the Aburi Accord was the final betrayal. There were no more tables to sit at. Forsyth notes that while Nigeria burned, the world mostly watched from a distance, favoring the federal side. The UN and the OAU maintained a policy of non-interference, viewing it as an internal Nigerian matter. Behind the political failure was a human resolve. Millions were ready to fight for a country of their own. Teachers, farmers, and students became soldiers overnight. The dream of Biafra had become a shared reality. We have traced the journey from a colonial unit to a fractured federation and the edge of independence. The trauma of 1966 remained the heartbeat of the Biafran movement throughout the coming war. Next time, the first shots are fired. We examine the declaration and the start of the conflict.